Thank you. My name is Doug. I too am an alcoholic. Truth is, I really don't have a problem with alcohol, except for when I drink. But I haven't found it necessary to do that since December the 3rd of 1990. It was last Saturday, the 4th of December, that I get to celebrate 31 years. Thank you.
All right.
This last year has been one of the most difficult and character-building years of my sobriety. I have driven the bus off into the weeds, to be honest with you. I've gotten out of the practice of those daily disciplines that are supposed to keep us happy, joyous, and free. And recently, the universe kind of smacked me in the head. And just to get my attention, I'm a seasonal visitor here to Havasu. I spend the last couple of summers up around Flagstaff because I'm a sissy and I don't endure the heat well. And I hitched up my 19-foot travel trailer, my home, and left Williams, Arizona on the 21st of October. And about 50 miles out, I lost control of the vehicle, and it ended up on its side. Both the trailer and my SUV ended up on their side, and boy, did I piss off a lot of people on Interstate 40. I suspect I turned that place into a parking lot for several hours. Had a minor injury, and they felt concerned about a broken blood vessel in my eye, and so I got a free ambulance ride, left everybody in the dust while they were clearing out the wreckage, and I got to experience the joys of the emergency room in Kingman. I have learned that under circumstances like this, a spot check inventory might be a good idea. To be honest with you, I made some critical errors in judgment. Basically, no judgment whatsoever. I knew that I had a faulty piece of tow equipment, and I got nobody to blame for that accident besides myself. The universe had already sent me warnings in the weeks previous that the trailer was not handling right, and I just ignored it. And one more time, I assumed the position of, hey, you know what, I got this. That's the same attitude that I entered recovery with in 1990. Hey, I got this. I had no confidence whatsoever in your silly program of recovery, thank you very much. I just knew that I was tired of going to jail at the most inconvenient times. And fortunately, Alcoholics Anonymous had some nice-looking women, and that was good enough for me. I needed something to do with my time on account I wasn't employable, and meetings were a pleasant alternative to the, what do they call those, wet blankets at home? I'd been married for 13 years, and now that I was sober, the rules were beginning to change. All of a sudden, I had an opinion. Prior to my getting sober, all I wanted to do was, just, yes, dear, whatever you want, just let me drink. And now that I was sober, the opinion was coming back, and I wanted to exert myself. I was a violent drunk. In the last 2 years of my drinking, I went to jail 7 times. All but one of those arrests had to do with domestic violence. And 2 of those arrests, I was the guy that called San Jose Police Department on account of I wanted them to come to the house and straighten her out. And not once, twice, both times, the San Jose PD encouraged me to come outside and talk with them about it. And I no sooner hit the sidewalk and they arrested me for drunken public. Not once, twice. Okay. I am not a quick study when it comes to being under the influence. My last arrest, I was charged with a violent felony, and California was getting sick of guys like me, and they had just passed a law that said she no longer has to press charges and we can hang on to you as long as we'd like. And that little error in judgment on my part meant that I got to sit in county jail for 2 sober weeks before my mother came to my rescue with a bail bond in the amount of $50,000. And over the course of that 2-week period, took me a few days, but I figured out precisely why it was the fault of the San Jose Police Department that I was there. But nevertheless, over the course of that 2 weeks, I figured out that, well, maybe Dougie needs to learn how to drink a little differently. Got out of jail, and over the course of the next few weeks, I tried some experiments. I tried to mix my cheap vodka with some fruit punch or dilute it somehow, and I would just end up drinking more. I would try to only drink when I had something in my stomach to begin with, only drink more. And then one night, I caught myself taking her inventory again. And it occurred to me that there was something a little bit queer about this. Like, I have been here, done this before, and I know how this turns out. It was that same kind of attitude that I found the freedom to dial 911 and get the police department to come out there before. And I didn't want to go to jail anymore. And it occurred to me that somewhere along the way, I had lost the ability to control and enjoy my drinking. I'd gotten to the point in my career that if I had anything to drink whatsoever today, I could no longer safely predict how this day was going to turn out. So, one more time, I came back to Alcoholics Anonymous. I had really been the In-N-Out burger for most of my 30s, and I just resigned myself to, one more time, exercising a lot of character and discipline, and just to be miserable for the rest of my sober life. That was my attitude as I came back into the rooms. And you know what? That really wouldn't change for almost the first year. I was 39 when I got back here. If you do the math, that means Dougie recently celebrated 70 years on this earth. Doesn't look too bad, does he? No. I turned 40 years old at 11 months of sobriety, and I remember coming out of the shower that morning and looking at myself in the mirror and recognizing the fact that I just didn't look like I was that 24-year-old stud that lived up here in the entertainment center. And I found that extremely depressing. And that stuck with me for a few days, and I did something very uncharacteristic and unusual. I picked up the phone and I called this guy that I called Sponsor to keep you people off my back. And I shared with Big Chris that, you know what, I just don't have a clue about how to be sober and how to be comfortable at the same time. And with that admission, things began to change briefly. As I look back on it today, I can see clearly that what accidentally happened was that Dougie accidentally worked the whole first step. Number one, I didn't want to go to jail anymore, kind of powerless over alcohol. And number two, clearly my life was unmanageable by me. I didn't know how to be sober and how to be comfortable at the same time. That was my first real brush with honesty in that first year. I made some extremely poor judgments in that first year. I knew that I needed something to feel better. I was not eager to work your 12 steps. Looked over the room and I identified a woman that was 8 years younger than me, 6 foot tall, and drop dead gorgeous. And I became convinced that if she and I were in a relationship, then I could endure this miserable reality. And at 14 months of sobriety, I abandoned my wife and 3 children in favor of this woman that I had met in the rooms. "30 years later, I'm just dealing with those decisions. during that first year of sobriety, it was a pleasure for me to bring my 5-year-old daughter, Lauren, to meetings with me. And she would bring her coloring book and her crayons, and she'd sit at the table next to me and create these masterpieces and hand them out to my friends in AA meetings. And my primary motivation in bringing her was so that I could appear to be a good dad in your eyes. I was extremely concerned with what you people thought of me. I had a really difficult time making any sort of eye contact. I had a very low opinion of myself. I didn't recognize that at the time. I didn't know what the hell to call it. But today I know it's called untreated alcoholism. I didn't do anything differently when I got to the rooms. As a practicing alcoholic, I was an accomplished liar. And to be honest with you, I think my real problem started as I got sober. My need to impress you, that emotional need to connect with somebody became even stronger. And I think my bullshit became even more sophisticated on account of I was extremely needy. My first drug of choice as I came into the room was your love and approval. The only reason I would stick my nose in that book in that first year of sobriety was so that I could memorize something and impress you people with my wisdom. And I did not take this program seriously. So for the first 3 years of my sobriety, I continued to make decisions based on self, and ended up in a relationship with this woman. Hurt a lot of people in those first couple of years. I brought the same low opinion into that relationship, that new relationship that I entered sobriety with. I needed a lot of reassurance. I became a very clever manipulator. If I didn't feel like I was getting enough of her attention, I would tell her about the woman that flirted with me at the mall this afternoon. Any kind of a rise out of her would satiate me for a little bit. I didn't recognize it at the time, but as I did those little manipulations, it was basically affecting my opinion of myself. I did not recognize that then. Today I know that all of my emotional pain is a direct result of my character defects. I didn't know that when I came into the rooms. I wouldn't even begin to glimpse that until I'd been here for 3 years. This woman, I think she loved me. She was extremely patient. She was a good listener, a great lover. The sex was just incredible. And that was like a drug to me. I just thought, this is how it is when you're in love. I didn't know any better. But over the course of that 2-year relationship, she kicked me to the curb 3 times. She was just fed up. By the 3rd time, she was done. And she kicked me out. And I moved my 35-year-old 13-foot travel trailer to a vacant lot in downtown San Jose next to a buddy's house, and proceeded to have a nervous breakdown. I didn't know it was a nervous breakdown. I thought, this is what a broken heart feels like. I'd never experienced such a thing. And I was sober. And I was hurting really bad. And it was characterized by the fact that I was sleeping every other night. When I could get some sleep, it would last for maybe an hour or 2. And then I'd wake up and be thinking about her again. She became my brand new mental obsession. That woman became my drug of choice. I know that today. I didn't know that then. Eventually, after all this sleep deprivation, I got to the point where I began to recognize that there was something going on up here that wasn't quite kosher. I remembered hearing in the meetings that under circumstances like this, it might be a good idea to go find another alcoholic to work with intensely. One night, as I laid there in that bunk in that 35-year-old travel trailer, it occurred to me that I should drive by her place and see whose car was in the parking lot. And I got down out of that bunk and got completely dressed. And then it occurred to me that regardless of what I saw in that parking lot, it was just going to make me feel worse. I got undressed, climbed back up into the bunk, and repeated that behavior 3 times. On the 3rd time, I could not resist it. This was an incredible mental obsession. Sure enough, I drove by that parking lot, took inventory of who was parked there, and it drove me crazy. And I felt even worse. The next day, it occurred to me that I should, connect with another alcoholic, and I went to our local Olano club, and I found myself a Michael that had 90 days, and I did something very uncharacteristic. I stuck my hand out to him, I asked him how he was doing, and then I shut up. That was a real discipline for me, but I was beginning to recognize that Dougie's got a problem that centers itself in his mind. The more I thought about her, the worse I felt. That was very clear and evident to me. So I did the very best I could to be present for that conversation with Michael and to listen to what he had to say. And I got a little bit of relief from that situation. That was good enough. Michael and I connected several times over the next few weeks, and eventually I felt so comfortable with him that I shared with him that I had been thinking about offing myself. This wasn't something I was willing to share with my sponsor. Got to run these things past, somebody else before you dump that kind of information on your sponsor. I mean, what if your sponsor doesn't love you anymore? So, you know what? I think that's the first time that my higher power got involved. And that higher power's voice came to me through Michael. And after I shared with Michael my thoughts about taking my own life, he said something incredibly profound. He said, well, Doug, if you go off and you do that, can you really be sure that what's on the other side isn't even worse than what you're feeling now? Whoa. That just, boing, hit me between the eyes. And it was in that moment that I began to get serious about this program. I got with my sponsor. I said, I feel horrible. And my sponsor said, well, have you asked God to help you? What a novel idea. I said, no, I haven't done that. So, God help me, God help me. I turned that into a mantra over the course. Every time I thought of it in my mind, I would say, God, please help me. Felt like I was just talking to the air. Nothing changed. Went back to my sponsor. He says, well, you know where the 3rd step prayer is? Nope. It says page 63. Why don't you read that every morning and every evening? And the only phrase in that 3rd step prayer that would stand out in my mind after reading it was, take away my difficulties. And I forgot the second half of that sentence, which says, so that victory over them may bear witness to your love. And what does it say? Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to God's help. I'm a little nervous tonight. Thank you. Anyway, so I'm doing the 3rd step prayer every morning and every evening, and nothing's changing. I go to my sponsor. I said, I'm not feeling any better. He says, well, maybe it's time to do that searching and fearless moral inventory. Oh, take a little action. That's a new word in my vocabulary. And I take a suggestion. He sits me down with all the pages that come with the Joe and Charlie tapes. And I start writing about my resentments. And it's laid out in a couple of different columns there. First column, you put the name of the offender. The second column is a box called the cause, and I always thought that was an essay question, and they give you a box that's about this big. And in the book, something I point out to my sponsees today is that there's only 19 words in there, and it's not an essay question. I used to put in that little box, refer to footnote number 6, and then I would write a goddamn page, because I was a smart guy. I was anticipating that 5th step, and what I pictured in my mind's eye is, sharing the cause with my sponsor and hearing something from him like, "Oh, they did that to you?" And anyway, my sponsor short-circuited that whole thing and made me rewrite some stuff. And the next step in that next column is to ask ourselves what was hurt or threatened. Now, that's not exactly what it says, but, we see words like self-esteem, sex relations, pocketbook. These all fall into the category of fears. And I would have to be around here for many more years before I recognized that passage in the book that suggests that the only time I'm ever pissed off is because I'm afraid of losing something I've got, or I'm afraid of not getting something that I want. And when I'm pissed off, it's about you. But when I'm afraid, it's about my self-reliance instead of my God-reliance. I didn't get around to a fears inventory until I'd been here for 6 years. When I was 6 years sober, it was time for Dougie to quit smoking. That morning cough was lasting until like 4 or 5 in the afternoon. Now there's a little bit of blood coming up with that other junk. And I went and saw a lady friend that I'd gotten sober with in the hospital, and she was in her last stages of emphysema. This was the same disease that took my father out. And I got to witness her in a violent struggle for her next breath. And with our modern medicine, they can keep you in that miserable state for months. And I became convinced at that point that, I'm not so much afraid of dying, but I sure as hell don't want to go that way. So I took the advice of half a dozen people in Alcoholics Anonymous that had successfully quit smoking and learned how to apply the same principles of recovery to that addiction. Read a book called How to Quit Smoking Even If You Don't Want To, which is a book that they recommend in Nicotine Anonymous, and learned a whole bunch of stuff. I was without nicotine for 2 weeks when my firstborn son came to me for that weekend. Jeremy had had a bicycle accident about 2 weeks earlier and lost consciousness at the scene. And the emergency room doctors had put him on a drug called Dilantin. Back in the day before they could schedule an MRI, they played it safe. And anytime you lose consciousness, there's a risk of seizures. So they put him on the anti-seizure medication. Medication's got some nasty side effects like just extreme fatigue and blurred vision. And so I got my son for the weekend, and Dougie's feeling really irritated with everybody in general, but my 16-year-old son is a very safe target. And I look at his behavior and I think, this kid is really trying to get my attention, and it really pisses me off. And I really let him have it that weekend. I got really angry with him. I took him home to his mother's, and a few days later he disappeared. He was gone for a day. He was gone for a few days. He's gone for a week. San Jose Police Department calls him a runaway. That just doesn't sit well with me. I'm beginning to feel an extreme amount of guilt for the way I treated him on that last weekend. And guilt is one of those emotions that Dougie just doesn't deal with very well. That's a particular emotion that I used to drink at. I get with my sponsor. My sponsor says, well, maybe it's time that you sit down and write a fresh 4-step. And in that 5th step, I get to share with my sponsor some stuff I've collected in that bag we carry around since the last inventory. Like, the women in my life had always been more important to me than my own children. I got to give that up in that 5th step. That was a hard one. To be honest with you, I was looking to appear like I was a great father. That's why I would have my kids for the weekend. In all honesty, my kids were an inconvenience. They got in the way of what Dougie wanted to do. 6 years sober, and I'm still selfish and self-centered to the max. Still wanting to secure your love and approval. Still wanting to look good. And now this guilt is just eating my lunch. I shared this inventory with my sponsor. We analyzed it for the character defects that were involved in my choices. And then I got exposure to step 6 for the first time. My sponsor had me return to our 4th step in the 12 and 12, where we got a list called the 7 deadly sins. He had me look up the meaning of those words. And once he was satisfied that I understood what they meant, he instructed me to ask myself 2 different questions about each one of those character defects. Like, what did my anger make me do that I shouldn't have done? What did my anger keep me from doing that I should have done? What did my pride make me do? I still remember the definition of pride. An inordinately high opinion of oneself. That was me. What did my pride make me do that I didn't want to do? His instruction was to write a full page in response to each one of these questions. To this day, I hate to write, but I was miserable, so I took the direction. And by the time I was done with that 14-page exercise, I could see clearly, for the first time in my life, that if I kept doing what I was doing, I was going to keep feeling like a piece of shit. Once I could connect those dots, it made good sense to begin practicing new behavior in step 7. How am I doing on time?
You're good.
Good.
Okay.
In step 7, I bit the bullet. 6 years sober, first time I've ever paid child support in my life. I've got the money. I'm making good money at the time. But every time I wrote that check, I would experience this feeling called financial insecurity on account of Dougie's never really had enough money, don't you know? And I would stress as that check would clear my checking account. And I explained to my sponsor that, this makes me feel very uncomfortable. And he points me back at page 68. And this is where I learn about the fears inventory. And at the top of page 68, it says something like, we reviewed our fears, we put them on paper, we asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance had failed us? There's also a solution at the bottom of page 68, which goes something like, we ask God to remove our fear and direct our attention to who we think this power would have us be. Now, I probably just botched the whole sentence, but that's essentially what it means. So one more time, feels like I'm talking to the air. I'm asking God to remove the fear, and then I put this thing to work on. So what does it look like to be the man that God would have me be? To this day, I think that guy is the guy that sticks his hand out to Mike and asks him how he's doing. It's really good to have you here tonight. The main reason in my mind why Mike is the most important person in this room is because it's my opportunity to get the hell out of the way. On page 62, what I read is that the selfishness and self-centeredness, that is the root of our problem. And it is, Mike is my opportunity to do something different rather than sit there and just be all caught up in my stuff. He's my opportunity to get outside of myself and to be the man that I can love and respect. That takes a lot of work. And the part on that whole equation that I don't like is that you don't get any instant results. So I'm paying the child support second month. I'm still not feeling any relief from this financial insecurity. And but I keep doing it, and gradually something is beginning to change. I am very gradually becoming the man that I can kind of sort of respect. It's not an instant fix. I hate that part even to this day, and I get to experience a brand new feeling. It's called self-respect and self-esteem. And it's evident to me because as I come to a meeting here, all of a sudden I'm not nearly as concerned with what you think about me. And that's very refreshing. Prior to that, I just worshiped your opinion of me. Miraculous. I still get caught up in your opinion of me. I'm 31 years sober, especially if I'm not practicing the daily disciplines. And there have been periods in my sobriety when I've gotten way off into the weeds. Fortunately, because of a thing called grace, I haven't found it necessary to drink, but remaining sober is not something I deserve. I'm convinced today that it's simply the result of God's grace that I've been able to, be the animal that I've been and remain sober. Jeremy was missing for 3 months when his remains were discovered in a place called Santa Teresa County Park, about a 15-minute walk from where he was living with his mother. That still chokes me up. It's been 25 years. We have a funeral for him. We put him in the ground. I still haven't cried. I go to my sponsor. My sponsor says, you're not going to find any peace around this until you set aside your pride and your ego long enough to lean into what you're feeling. And his instruction was for me to buy a bouquet of helium balloons and to take those and my magic marker and go to this hilltop down in South San Jose and write on the side of these balloons those things that I most appreciated about my son. And then to release these balloons one at a time. I didn't even get so much as a tear in my eye until I'd released that third balloon. But I'm here to tell you tonight that by the time I got to that last balloon, I was crying violently. I was crying harder than I ever had in my whole life. And that's when something miraculous happened. This feeling of incredible peace and tranquility just washed over me. It was totally unexpected. Today I know that I get to experience stuff like that on the other side of doing stuff I don't like to do. I don't like to not look good. I don't like to take responsibility. It's important. I got to get real with Doug every so often. Life begins for me at the end of my comfort zone. I salute everyone in this room. This staying sober is not for sissies, and especially the staying comfortable is not it's not a simple task. We got to be willing to do some stuff that we don't want to do. We got to be willing to take the action before we get the relief, before we get the wisdom, before we get the hindsight. It's just inescapable. I have looked for the softer, easier way since I've been sober. I still catch myself doing that. Anyway, on October the 21st of this year, I lost control of my car. It ended up on its side, along with my travel trailer, my home, and those things now reside at a wrecking yard in Kingman, Arizona. Both vehicles were underinsured. The trailer had everything I owned in it. So I'm laying in the gurney in that emergency room in Kingman, I don't know, 6-7 weeks ago. And I'm asking myself the kind of questions that you've trained me to ask. Like, what the hell's wrong with this picture? Why did this happen? And I'm beginning to kind of sort of lean into the truth of the matter. The universe had already sent me warnings. I had not taken the time to make sure that new equipment was properly adjusted, and I had nobody to blame for that accident besides myself. I called friends, other nomad friends, 100 miles away, and before I was even released from the emergency room, they had driven 100 miles and were there to rescue Dougie. Evidence of my higher power. When I play this game by the rules, the universe sends me evidence that it's working. I watch doors open effortlessly. Do I let them open? Most of the time, no. I hate to ask for help. One of my two friends suggests that I can stay in the back of her 32-foot palace of a motorhome with flat screen TV, 2 sliders, just incredibly beautiful. Very different from Dougie's original plan to, get this open heart surgery and recover in this 43-year-old dilapidated old travel trailer. The universe wanted something better for me. That I'm convinced today. But I had to be willing to get out of the way. And that surrender process took me 3 days. I slept like crap for the first 3 days after that wreck. I still wanted to bring the intellect to bear on the problem. It only occurred to me after 3 days of that sleepless struggle that maybe I should get this power involved in the equation. And after the 3rd day, I was willing to ask this power for help. To this day, most of the time, it feels like I'm just talking to the air. On the other hand, every so often, I feel so connected to this power that I could run out and get a tent and a tambourine. Doesn't happen very often, doesn't last for very long. I tend to screw those kind of experiences up rather quickly. Anyway, I accept her help after relying on this for a little bit. This says, well, you could stay with her, or you could pitch your tent and be self-reliant. And that didn't make a lot of sense to me, so I accepted her offer. After a few days, I'm posting on Facebook about poor Dougie's troubles, and more than a dozen people come to me and say, maybe you should start a GoFundMe account. Oh, no, I can't do that, that I'd have to be thankful and grateful and jeez. Anyway, I begin to lean into that as an alternative. The surrender stuff still doesn't come easy to me. Anyway, I agree to do the GoFundMe thing, and within 72 hours, more than 75 people step up and contributes thousands of dollars, almost $6,000, to Dougie's Get His New Home campaign. And that just amazes me. But the stuff like that only happens in my world when I'm willing to set aside my pride and my ego and take responsibility for where I am today. I look back on that, and I think the universe caught me on a roll and was kind of tickled with where Dougie was headed with this. On November the 3rd, I turned myself into Flagstaff Medical Center, and I had open heart surgery. This was not an emergency surgery. It was something that had been planned for a few weeks. I would end up in the hospital for 14 days. I had some complications. It's a 5-hour operation. And after the 5-hour operation, they keep you on a ventilator for a while and give this stuff an opportunity to begin healing. The ventilator experience was absolutely terrifying. As they begin to turn off the anesthesia, the first thing that comes back to life is your brain. But the rest of your body is kind of slow to respond. Now, this slowness for me is probably only 5 or 10 seconds, but in that little period, my lungs are not working. The breathing tube is already out of me, but the anesthesia chemistry is still rushing through my blood. And for the life of me, I cannot breathe. And I have, under the distinct impression that Dougie's suffocating. My first thought is that something's gone horribly wrong with this surgery. And this is what it feels like when you're about to die. My next thought was, I got a whole lot of unfinished business that I have that's still on the table. I haven't provided for my children. I did this thing called the 5 wishes before surgery that, it's kind of, the hospitals call that what do they call that? Well, this is what you do if Dougie turns into a vegetable. This is how Dougie wants to be treated under those circumstances. But there's nothing in that document that addresses the people that care about you. Anyway, that begins the burn off of a few more layers of pride and ego during that 14-day stay in the hospital. There were 2 occasions over the course of that 14 days where the hospital said, "We think we're going to send you home tomorrow." The first time that happened, the next day I came down with a condition called AFib, which is, it happens about 30% of the time for people that have a surgery like mine. And I think probably the best way to explain it is that all of a sudden my heart's got a brand new blood supply, and I got 4 chambers in the heart that are supposed to work like a team. And these 4 chambers are really excited to have this new blood flow, and they're not cooperating with the boss. All of them are very excited, and they're all pumping like crazy, like Yahoo! They're just not pushing any blood. They're pushing against each other. And so I'm experiencing this incredible pounding in my chest, and I'm sure that here we go again. This is the end. And it takes me back to the thoughts about what a poor father I've been. I have leaving absolutely no positive legacy, and look at what I've just done a shitty job. Here I am, I'm 30 years sober, and what do I get to show for it? And anyway, I get on the other side of the AFib, they treat me with some drugs, and a few days later, the condition corrects itself. The next morning, I think I'm going home. They've done a chest x-ray and discovered that I've got pneumonia. And they treat me with some real industrial strength antibiotics. Nothing's changing over the course of 3 days. Then they get some lab results from some stuff I coughed up, and they come up with the right treatment. And overnight, my white cell count drops dramatically, and finally, I got to come home. Friends here in Lake Havasu City were aware of my problems, and the universe provided me with my next upgrade. They said, come stay with us while you're recovering. Beautiful home right here in Lake Havasu City, in-ground pool, nice and flat, no stairs for Dougie to climb. And that's where I've been ever since. The universe has sent me a new car. That car is having some transmission work done now. I'm just amazed at how easy this stuff happens once I get the hell out of the driver's seat. That's still hard for me. I still like to be large and in charge. Being self-reliant is still the strongest muscle in my personality. So you got to hit me pretty hard before I'm willing to turn my will and my life over to the care of this thing I don't understand. But invariably, every time I do that, I just watch doors open effortlessly in my life. No effort on my part. I don't know what tomorrow holds. I do know that it's amazing to me how easy my ego can resurrect itself. Recently, I kind of recommitted myself to getting back into the daily disciplines, reading the third step prayer every morning, starting on page 84 and reading to the end of that chapter, and recommitting to the solution. But without any effort whatsoever, I did that a whole 2 days in a row, and then on day 3, I had a sudden new priority that was more important than doing that daily discipline. And fortunately, I reined myself in. I'm staying close to some men in this program, and I'm telling on my shit on a frequent basis. And that's what's saving my life. This 10th step, I continue to take personal inventory. One of the benefits of being around here for a while and achieving the ripe old age of 70 years old is a recognition that, you know what, it takes a whole lot of stamina to live in the problem. I don't have the stamina that I did when I got here at age 39. And for that, I'm occasionally grateful, because it means I surrender a little bit easier. I'm here to tell you that this surrender is like just another muscle. It gets stronger with use. It gets a little bit easier for me to surrender. I don't have to go to the horrible places that I've gone to in the past. I think it's unfortunate, but I still got to get the universe to smack me upside the head from time to time. I tend to react and respond to a little bit of emotional discomfort. I've had to let go of a lot in sobriety. I'm grateful that I've had some excellent mentors. It's really good to see so many friends here that I recognize from last winter. I really appreciate you folks coming out to support me. My name is Doug. I too am an alcoholic. That was pretty good, huh?
Yeah.